Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we are going to cover section 13 of chapter 6 from Bhava Prakash by Sri Bhava Mishra. This is Vadi Varga. I apologize, the condition of this presentation is not as polished as I would have liked. And also you may wonder, what can we really say about water from the perspective of Ayurveda? Well, as it turns out, quite a bit. So basically this chapter describes water according to different sources and how it's collected. And the general principle is that water acquires subtle properties of its environment. Now, the emphasis here is on subtle. So sometimes, we describe things such as, for example, saying that water from a pond is going to have qualities of being heavy to digest. Well, this is relative, bearing in mind that we're talking about water from different sources. But from the perspective of Ayurveda, we are very concerned about the subtleties of things, and these little subtleties add up to, differences when we're trying to make an impact, on changing the balance. We always want to consider these things. Now, of course, another big thing here is that we don't always really have much opportunity to choose where we get our water from. Basically, you can choose different bottled water sources, or you can take your tap water and you can run it through your reverse osmosis system to try to get out all the additional stuff that it has acquired as it's gone through. For example, here in California, what do we get? We get water that has a lot of mineral content because it has mostly come from the Colorado River, which has come from snow melt in the Rockies. Most of the water in California comes from outside California. And there's a smaller amount of water that comes from the Sierra Nevada snow melt. But that water has been pumped over the mountains through a series of reservoirs, and finally it makes its way into municipal water systems. And by the time it's gone through all that, it's picked up quite a bit of hardness, mineral content. And so, and that's basically what we have to deal with. So you can get different spring waters and other water from different sources, but but understanding how water can take on different subtle properties, this is the important thing. This is really the takeaway. You don't really have the choice of going down to the river and getting water or going and getting water from a pond, but the point is to understand how different sources affect the properties of water. Another very important point to make in the beginning is that even if let's say, for example, we talk about ocean water and properties of ocean water, well, some of those properties of ocean water will also apply if you bathe in it. This season, and even here in Southern California, mostly if you're going to go bathe in the ocean, you're going to do it in a wetsuit, because especially here in San Diego, we have very deep water offshore, and the water, even in the summertime, tends to be a little bit on the cold side, and right now it's downright frigid. So, and of course, if you're somewhere farther north, you are probably not thinking about bathing outside anywhere unless it's in a heated pool indoors. So anyway, the other thing is, obviously common sense prevails. So, we talk about drinking water. There are some things that are measurable and quantifiable. There's mineral content, there's pH, there's bacterial contamination, there's heavy metal content, other chemical contamination, even additives like, the fluorides that are added to water, arguably whether that's, it's something that's done to help with dental health. And of course, some people have ideas about that being, having other side effects and so forth. But generally, our preference is going to be to have natural water, but we don't want to have bacteria and other, algae, amoebas, other types of things. If you've experienced that in your water, it's a very unpleasant experience, and it's something you don't want to repeat. So, therefore, water gets chlorine added, which is poisonous. Very interestingly, one of the sections in Bhava Prakash deals with Dravya and talks about the properties of various poisons and how various poisons are used in Ayurveda as well, except that they have to be prepared in a way that they are purified, and their dangerous properties are reduced, and of course, obviously, they have to be used in a very careful and judicious manner. So, we in the West, we typically have to deal with governmental regulations that will just outright ban anything that's a nutritional supplement if having it in sufficient quantity is going to cause harm to your health. And that has resulted in many certain things, such as bala, which is, an Ayurvedic herb, which is banned because having bala in sufficient quantity can cause certain types of adverse health conditions. Anyway, the point here is that we're talking about these subtle properties of water. It doesn't override whatever normal precautions you might take with water. Particularly, outside water in North America can be contaminated with bacteria such as Giardia. Giardia is a parasite, I believe. It's a very nasty one, and it can cause very severe health effects. But there are bacteria and parasites that are present in outside water in North America. So I think it goes without saying you really need to exercise your own common sense if you want to, experiment with collecting and drinking water from different places. So let's move right along here. So Paniya, paryaya, what are the synonyms of water? So these are some of the Sanskrit synonyms. The Sanskrit terms that I have in this presentation are in an encoding system called Harvard Kyoto, which looks a little funny, but it was done in a little bit of a hurry, and we will be converting this to a regular, Unicode diacritical system. So what are some of the symptoms? Paniya. Paniya literally means drinkable. Salila, Nida, Kilala, Jala, Ambu, Apa, Vari, Kam, Toya, Payas, Patas, Udaka, Jivana, Vana, Ambha, Arna, Amrita, Ghanarasa. These are all synonyms for water. What are some of the properties of water? What is water good for? Well, it relieves fatigue, it relieves exhaustion, it can relieve fainting, it relieves thirst, obviously. It relieves a stupor, it can relieve vomiting, and it relieves constipation. We all know what happens if we don't drink enough water. This is always a problem for me, and when things get cold, I drink less water, and suddenly, oh, wait, why am I getting constipated? Oh, it's because I'm not having enough water. Water bestows strength. Water can ward off sleep. Water is nourishing and it's good for the heart. Water may carry concealed tastes. The word used is guptarasa. It mitigates indigestion, ajirnashamaka. So sometimes if one is having trouble with digesting, sometimes half an hour after eating when there is indigestion, drinking a small amount of water at room temperature is helpful. And there goes my mouse. Water is always beneficial. Cooling, shitala, easy to digest, helpful with taste, and enlivening like amrita or nectar. So these are all general properties of water. Okay, we know water is just wonderful stuff. You know, and we usually need a good amount of it every day. Okay, so two basic types according to sages. There's divya, which is atmospheric water from the sky, and there's bhauma, or groundwater, water from the earth. Now, divya water is further divided into 4 subtypes. There is DhArAjala, which is rainwater from rain showers. And then there is Karaka-bhava, water from melted hailstones. I have actually never tried that before. We don't get much hail, but water from melted hailstones is one of these 4 subtypes. TuSAra, water from condensation or dew. And Hima, water from snowmelt. And of these 4 types, the DhArAjala is the best. So a lot of our water is going to be coming from snowmelt. It may come from snowmelt and then come into reservoir. So, you know, water tends to move around. That's the nature of water. It flows, it moves, it evaporates, it condenses. Water from condensation mostly is what you're going to find outside. If you go outside, you know, on a cool morning, you'll have overnight condensation that forms. This time of year, it'll tend to be frost. But that condensation, and there's ways that you can collect the water from condensation. But this is considered the best type, to have rainwater from rain showers. Now, why do we say rain showers? Because if the rain is drizzling, that's going to be considered more in the category of TuSAra. It's going to be water from condensation. If you just have a drizzle, dhara means when there's an actual shower, when you basically go outside in the rain and you're going to get soaked if you don't have an umbrella. That's a dhara, or a shower. So that's what we're talking about when we say DhArAjala, water. Okay. So let us talk about DhArAjala, water from rain showers. So yes, so as mentioned before, this is dhara means a shower of rain. It could be a torrential downpour, or it could be a light rain. It's not drizzling or heavy fog, which could produce water. That would be categorized as TuSAra. So rainwater collected through a clean cloth into a depression in rock previously washed, or in a broad vessel of gold, silver, copper, rock crystal, glass, or clay is called DhArAjala. Basically, you can collect rainwater and then strain it through a clean cloth to take out, you know, various small non-microscopic contamination. DhArAjala mitigates all 3 doshas, has imperceptible taste, anirdesha rasa. So basically, it's clear, clean water. It doesn't have a taste. It's easy to digest, cold in potency, shitala, cooling. It's strengthening, nourishing, satisfying, pleasing to the heart, enlivens digestion, rasayana. It stimulates the intelligence, and it also can relieve fainting, stupor, burning sensation, exhaustion, and thirst. The water that's collected during the first rains of the season is especially good for health. Now, there's a distinction made between water that comes in the season, and this is especially referring to the cycle of 6 seasons. One of these 6 seasons is the rainy season. The rainy season is in North India and in South India. You get these 6 distinct seasons, and one of them is the rainy season. There's a time when you get a lot of rain. Here in Southern California, we also have, in the winter, we tend to get more of the rain. This year has been a very unusual one, where there's been a lot of rain throughout the fall, and usually most of our rain comes in December through February. But every climate has a time when you get more rain. I used to live on the east coast of the U.S., and we would get a lot of very heavy rain during the summer and a lot of electrical storms. And it was a regular thing when I was growing up. We would, we had a creek running behind the house, and we would see it in flood, and it was sort of a, childhood pastime to see how high the creek was getting to its flood stage. But every place has different seasons when rain tends to come more. Some places rain all the time. They do not really have a perceptible change. But when you have seasonal rain, rain that comes in season is better than rain that comes out of season. So that's the point there. Now, what are these further subtypes of DhArAjala, or rainwater? So there's Ganga, or sweet drinking water, and Samudra, or salty, undrinkable water. So Ganga water is said to come from the Akash Ganga, or the celestial Ganga, through clouds, and is released as rain during July-August, which is the peak of the rainy season in India. It should be collected in gold, silver, or clay vessels. Cooked rice mixed with this water should not become slimy and should retain its original color. This would be basically, a test for its being chemically neutral, not being overly acidic or alkaline. So this water is called Ganga, and it mitigates all 3 doshas. Water that has the opposite qualities is called Samudra. Samudra means of or related to Samudra, or the sea, so it's salty water. It has an alkaline taste or a salty taste. This type of water leads to loss of Shukra Dhatu and loss of visual acuity. It may have a bad smell. It will aggravate all 3 doshas. It will have a sharp or tikshna quality, and it's not beneficial for treatments. During July, August, this water is said to have properties of Ganga water due to the influence of nakshatra. So again, this is relating to Jyotish. There's considered to be different properties of water sometimes depending on where the sun is in relation to the sidereal zodiac. So these are 2 major subtypes of the DhArAjala. Unseasonal rainwater. So we talked about seasonal versus unseasonal. So rainwater, which is not in its normal season, is called anartava, and it will tend to aggravate all 3 doshas. So it means that, when we are, even if we're inside the house and we're dry, there will be an aggravation of dosha. So it's unseasonal. When the rainwater has come out of season, it's going to have more of an aggravating effect. Now, this is relative. It doesn't mean you should avoid water. Well, of course not. But it means that we should be aware of different properties of water at different times and in different seasons. Water from hailstones. So the combination of water, air, and fire in the atmosphere causes water to solidify and fall down like stones. These are called karaka, or hail, and they are considered to be like amrita, nectar. Now, interestingly, this is considered to be the genesis of hail, is the combination of water, air, and fire. Now, the weather description of how hail is formed is that you have clouds which carry moisture in the form of water vapor, and then you get little droplets that might form rain, but they get carried up very high so that they freeze, and there has to be kind of a circulating updraft. So there's a combination of water in the cloud, and there's the air in the form of the updraft, and the fire in the form of there needs to be a temperature differential that causes this very large, and when we're talking about updraft, we're talking about updraft that carries it up for maybe a mile or so. The types of clouds that form hailstones usually are very, very high. The base of the clouds may be a few miles up, but the tops are much higher. So there's a big differential of freezing, where there's an opportunity for the hailstone to circulate until it gets so heavy that even that heavy updraft cannot sustain it, and then it plummets. So these hailstones are considered to have very good properties. Water from melted hailstones causes dryness. It's somewhat drying. It is clear, vishada. It's heavy for digestion, guru. It has the fixed property of sthira. It's cooling, shitala. It's dense, sandra. And it reduces pitta and increases kapha and vata. So these are all properties of water from hailstones. And this is all pretty much a direct translation from the Bhava-prakash. So TuSAra-jala. TuSAra-jala is from condensation. Water vapor from rivers evaporated by the action of fire and water without steam is called TuSAra, or vapor condensing into dew or as fine droplets. So without steam, meaning we're not talking about volcanic steam or heating. We're talking about the natural process of evaporation where water becomes water vapor. And then it condenses. So basically, water vapor is carried in the air. We all breathe air with water vapor. If you had air with zero water vapor, it would be a relative humidity of 0, and that would actually be harmful to breathe. You would have great difficulty because it would be drying out your lungs and taking air from your body very quickly. If you live in a desert climate, places like Tucson, Arizona, where the relative humidity sometimes gets down below 10%, people have a lot of respiratory problems in that type of condition. But anyway, when you have water vapor in the air and then the air temperature drops, its ability to hold moisture is reduced, and then the water needs to condense. It'll either condense on the coldest surface as dew. It can also condense as fine droplets when you have sort of a fog or a cloud and you feel some little droplets of water against your face. That can be collected as TuSAra-jala. So this water from dew, it's not good for the health of animals, but it is good for plants. Plants really do well with dew. It's very good for them. It has cold potency. It causes dryness. It increases vata and slightly increases pitta. It can cure diseases arising from kapha. And it's good for stiffness of the legs, diseases of the throat, maladies of the digestive fire, diabetes, swollen lymph glands, etc. So there are a lot of interesting properties for that condensation. If someone wanted to collect condensation water, you know, you could basically set up something like a cold piece of plate glass outside and have a little collection trough underneath it. You would not be able to collect much, and you would have to put a good amount of work in to keep it clean, but you know, you can collect, and of course there are survival tricks that people use. Usually they'll use plastic, and you know, plastic wouldn't be the best material to use to do that collection, but you could do the same thing with glass. Hima, or snowfall. Again, this is the description of Bhauma-jala. Water which solidifies and falls from the sky like rain in mountains like Himalaya is known as Hima, or snow. Water from snowmelt is known as Hima-jala, or Himambu. Hima-jala is cold in potency, mitigates pitta, is heavy for digestion, and increases vata. So I don't know if you've ever hiked up to a mountain with a high glacier. There's one place in the Himalayas which I haven't been to. I've been to you know, glacier melt places. I once climbed up on Mount Rainier, and there's a place there where the water comes out from the glacier. Gomukha is the origin of the Ganga River in India, and it's up high in the Himalayas, and you have a very large cave, and it's called Gomukha because it has the similarity to a cow's mouth being wide open, and the river comes out, and it comes out very cold, and it's a very clean and pure water. So it's obviously very cooling, but it has, you know, it has special properties. It's a very cold water, very clean, very pure. So that's water from snowfall. Now there are others who say, and again, this is exactly what is in the text here. Others say that seawater vaporized by the action of Agni, brought by breezes over land and then becoming solid, is called Hima. So basically, this is just describing the, you know, the general model of water. The sun on ocean evaporates water. Moisture-laden air goes inland, and as it moves into mountains, it raises its, it goes up in elevation, it drops in temperature, and then you have the right combination of conditions for snow to form. So Hima water is cold in potency, causes dryness, and has the gunas of hardness, dharana, and fineness, or sukshma. It does not increase vata, pitta, or kapha. So, you know, this is, again, an alternative opinion on this Hima-jala. When we're talking about properties of water, these are subtle properties. That means it's not as pronounced as, for example, you know, if you have, let's say if you have ginger tea, if a water may have some cold properties, but if you heat the water and then you have a hot tea and you add some fresh ginger to it and some honey, that's going to have a heating action. The action, the gunas of the ginger and the honey and maybe some black pepper that you add are going to be overwhelming the properties of the water. Still, you know, the properties of the water are something that are worth understanding. But the things that you add to it are likely to have a stronger effect. So now we've talked about divya water, water that comes from the sky. Now we're going to talk about Bhauma-jala, or groundwater, terrestrial water. So groundwater is divided in 3 subtypes: Jangala water, water from desert-like lands; Anupa water, water from marshy or swampy lands; and Sadharana water, water from temperate lands. So what are these three things exactly? Jangala is that land where there's very little water, where you have small trees, and where people suffer from diseases of pitta and rakta, dry lands, dry places. Anupa is that land where there's plenty of water, large trees, and where people suffer from diseases of vata and kapha. So wetlands, basically. Oh, did we miss something? Okay, and then there's one other thing that dropped off here. And then Sadhana is that land that has properties of both, where there's, there's water, but it's also, it's not swampy, it's not marshland. So what are the properties of these three types of water? So Jangala Salila, water from dry lands, causes dryness, tends to be salty. It would be easy to digest, mitigates pitta, increases digestive fire, and will also mitigate many afflictions arising from kapha, and it is good for health. Anupavati, or water from swampy wetlands, causes accumulation of moisture in the body, has the gunas of being sweet, oily, thick, and heavy for digestion, increases kapha, causes diseases of kapha origin, and is good for the heart. Sadhana-jala, water from temperate lands, has the gunas of being sweet, increases digestive fire, cold in potency, shitala, easy or light to digest. It is nourishing, it helps taste, relieves thirst, relieves burning sensation, and mitigates all three doshas. So again, the takeaway here is that water will tend to also take on the properties of the land where it is found. River water. Now, there are two words in Sanskrit which are used, nada and nadi. Nadi refers to rivers which flow south and east from the Himalayas into the Bay of Bengal, and nada, rivers flowing west from the central mountains into the Arabian Sea. In general, river water is called nadeya. So river water causes dryness, increases vata, is easy to digest, or lagu, it has a lightness, it increases digestive fire, it does not cause accumulation of internal moisture, it is clear, vishada, pungent, katu, and mitigates kapha and pitta. Water of rivers which flow swiftly are easily digestible and have pure water, while that of rivers which flow slowly is harder to digest. So this is an interesting point to consider. Is it a fast-moving river or a slow-moving river? Examples of fast-moving river, it depends on the part of the river. So for example, the Ganga River in the northern parts of India is a very fast-moving river. There's a place at Haridwar. In Haridwar, the Ganga is a very fast-moving river and is still dropping in elevation. When people want to bathe in the Ganga, there's a big, heavy chain that you have to hold on to not get swept away by the current. That would be, would be very disastrous to get swept away by that very swift current. Whereas if you go down to lower places, the Ganga is still moving swiftly, not as swiftly. Other rivers tend to meander more, like the Amazon, for example, is a river which mostly moves very slowly, and only up in the Andean highlands where it originates, it's a swiftly moving river. Rivers arising from the Himalayas are healthy since their path is through rocks. These include the Ganga, Shatadru, Sarayu, Yamuna, etc., and they are considered superior in quality. Rivers from the Sahya Mountains, the western Ghats, such as Vena and Godavari, may give rise to skin diseases and increase Vata and Kapha slightly. So these are the observations and opinions of the author on these different rivers. So in general, now here's where we really talk about the general principle. Good and bad qualities of water from rivers, lakes, ponds, wells, streams, and other sources should be understood according to the nature of the land where these water sources are present. So we've talked about these subtle properties of being light and being easy to digest or being a little heavier to digest, and we should understand these according to the properties of the land where such groundwater sources are found. So another category is spring water. Now, spring water is probably one of these categories that's a little easier to get. You have more choice in terms of getting different spring water. You can get water from some mineral springs that has a higher mineral content. You can even find water from mineral springs that has a high sulfur content. When I was a kid, we used to go to a park in West Virginia called Lost River, and there was a sulfur spring there. So the water came out, and it had a really strong sulfur smell. There are a few places like that. There are some places where water has a very high iron content, and especially in the U.S., and I think especially in central U.S., sometimes people will do water treatments because they can't wash clothes. Their white clothes all come out stained with a reddish color. Anyway, so spring water can have many different properties. So the sages say that water which comes out in a spring, which bursts forth from the ground, and this really conjures images of an artesian well, but it also refers to a normal spring. That water is called Audbhida-jala. So Audbhida-jala mitigates pitta, does not cause heartburn, is cold in potency, enlivening, sweet, strengthening, increases vata slightly, and is easily digestible. So, you may find that sometimes water from a particular spring works better for you than other water, and it may be something different than just the properties of the water or the way that it's bottled, or you like the type of packaging that they put it in. But it may also have something to do with the properties of the place in which that water comes out. Nairjhara. So water which flows down the slopes of mountains is called prasravana or Nairjhara. This water helps taste, mitigates kapha, augments digestive fire, easy to digest or lagu, sweet, has pungent vipak, and increases vata but not pitta. Now it's very interesting when we talk about water and we talk about digestion, we talk about whether water is lagu or guru. I don't know about others. My experience is personally that I can only digest water at a certain rate. There's a rate at which my body's able to assimilate water, and I can't just, chug down huge quantities of it. That's actually not recommended. One should be able to digest. One should be able to process water. Also, taking in water along with food. We also will, taking water in the right quantity is important as well. Not having any water can make it hard to digest. Having too much water will also interfere with the digestive fire. Having water that's too cold, like ice water that, they serve everywhere, very bad. Can you please bring me water with no ice? Thank you very much. So water flowing down the slopes of mountains. So this is mountain water, stream water, or water that comes down a fall. Okay. Natural lakes. So when rivers are obstructed in their course by mountains, they form sadas. And sadas are described as always being covered by lotuses. So you basically have a natural lake, and this is not a static. So a sadas is not a static lake, it's a dynamic lake. There's a river that has been obstructed and it has formed a lake, so there's always water entering and there's always water leaving it, and some sediment accumulates. What happens when sediment accumulates? Then you get water plants, especially lotuses. Lotuses love sediment. They love the richness of sediment that comes as water moves along. So a sadas is basically a lake that has a river entering it and a river leaving it, and it accumulates sediment, and it has lotus flowers and other aquatic plants growing in it. Water from natural lakes, which is called TuSAra-jala, gives strength, mitigates thirst, is sweet in taste, easily digestible or lagu, helps taste, is astringent, causes dryness, and will tend to block the elimination of urine and stool. Ponds and reservoirs. Now, why is there a distinction made between ponds and reservoirs and these sadas? So the sadas has water entering it and leaving it. A reservoir or a pond does not necessarily have a constant supply of water coming in. It may receive water from late rainfall. So the definition is that there's a reservoir of water which is clean. It has to be a clean and auspicious place, and it has to have been there for a long time. This is called dadaga. And basically, it may have water added to it through rainfall so that it doesn't dry up, but it typically does not have a stream flowing into it or a river. The water of such ponds and reservoirs is sweet, astringent in taste, has pungent vipak, increases vata, blocks the elimination of urine and stool, and cures bleeding diseases, and cures diseases of kapha origin. So this could be a natural pond, or it could be an excavated reservoir, but basically it's one that is not that doesn't have water constantly flowing into it. Artificial reservoir with steps. So I don't know if you've ever been to India, especially if you've been to places, pilgrimage places. You always see these. You see these reservoirs that have been constructed out of stone and have steps, and they're actually often very deep. Sometimes you only see a square bathing place, and everyone goes there to wash their clothes, which of course doesn't always make for the type of water you would want to drink. Traditionally, these would be constructed in ancient times as a reservoir, a place where there's clean water. So even if it becomes dry, you take water from there for drinking, for cooking, for bathing, but you don't pollute that water. You don't contaminate it by washing clothes and letting your raw sewage go into it. And unfortunately, that is often, all too often, that is the case sometimes in India, because other water sources are just not really present. So these deep reservoirs that are made with stones and have flights of steps, they are called vapi. Water from such reservoirs or tanks, if it's alkaline in taste, will increase pitta and mitigate kapha and vata. If sweet in taste, it will increase kapha and mitigate vata and pitta. Now, drinking water. So what are some concepts related to drinking water? If you boil water and then cool it, the water is lighter and easier to digest. There's some simple principles of physics here as well. When you boil water and then cool it down, you are basically reducing the dissolved air in the water. So you are also giving it properties of Agni. The water now has properties of Agni, even if it has cooled to room temperature, and room temperature is going to usually be somewhat cool. That water which was boiled is going to have Agni properties, and it's going to help with digestion. It'll be easier to digest. Drinking hot water will tend to mitigate vata and kapha. Drinking water from a vessel made of silver or ceramic is cooling. So what we drink water from makes a difference. There's also water from copper. There have been many descriptions of Ayurvedic Vaidyas who will sometimes give someone as a cure for indigestion, have them drink water from a copper pot. Drinking water from a copper pot will tend to be heating, and it will tend to increase digestive fire. So actually having copper, now it's actually possible to get these things commonly. They have these Moscow mule mugs, and you can actually get them in pure copper, not lined with something. And just having water from a copper glass, from a copper vessel, will help with digestion if you're having problems with Agni. And that is the end of the presentation. So I am going to pause the